Hi, I'm Mark Fine.
And I'm Ronnie Lerner.
That's something a little bit different, but you are still watching Footyology. Welcome to Footyology TV. As you can see, Rocco, no show. Rocco's off to China. Well, he's in China. And of course, that means he'll be watching some football next week between Port Adelaide and the home team Gold Coast. And in his stead, Ronnie Lerner from The Age.
Great to be here. Great to be here, Finey. And I hope that Rocco has the right VPN in China, because there's some devices that can be blocked out. So hopefully he is able to watch the other 8 games next week rather than just the Gold Coast.
If he doesn't, we've got the right man to take his place. Let's, before we get stuck into the games, just a little bit of housekeeping. You're all over the, hots or knots?
Hots or knots, the rant off.
Beautiful.
Being well schooled.
And just quickly, what did you make of the round? What sort of is the standout story? If there was a headline to come out of round 8, what would it be?
Oh, I think we have to cast our minds all the way back to Friday night. Ben Ronke, and I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce it, but how about that for a third game? Just the lazy 7 snags. So I think that was sensational. How about yourself?
It's hard to go past the fella from Benalla. His dad, Jim Ronke, played for Benalla, the Benalla Saints.
Is that right? There you go.
And yeah, I actually know a couple of people who played football for Benalla, and a bit of a star. Often it's the case, isn't it? If you haven't heard of the family football name, delve into local football or country football, and you'll find that there are plenty of champions that have produced great footballers. For me, a bit of the story out of the round, I reckon the headline out of the round is tick-tock, time's running out for GWS.
Very interesting, that one. Yeah.
A lot of injuries. Anyhow, why not get stuck into all of the games with our wraparound? It's time for the wraparound, where we look at all 9 games. We give 3 of them the Footyology special focus treatment, but the other 6 games certainly get a look-see as well. And you mentioned Friday night, of course. It was, I think it always is, a tight affair and reminiscent of finals football when Hawthorn and Sydney get together.
Absolutely.
And this one was a special because, to be honest, Hawthorn seemed to have, if not control of the game, I think they had hand, to use a bit of Seinfeld. Sydney, did they steal it? Ronnie Lerner, what did you make of the game? And again, come back, Sherry.
Yeah, no issue.
Again, was that one that Hawthorn had taken from them, or one that Sydney deserved to win? Look, they deserved to win.
Yeah. I think it's unfair to say that the Swans stole it. I thought it was throughout the whole game, it was a real arm wrestle. And these games have these two teams, they have a real, especially in recent history, they've got a real, a tendency to produce these really tight, contested games. I mean, last year there were those 2 magnificent Friday night games that went right down to the wire. And this was another example. They're really building a magnificent rivalry, these 2 teams. And yeah, just as Hawthorn looked like they were getting away, like they managed to really, create some goals out of nothing, which they really do very well in tight games through Gunston and Bruce. They've having great years, those 2. But Sydney just seemed to always find ways to get back into the game. And then the last quarter, they just busted the game open, 5 goals to 1, and deserved winners. That was sensational. And second time in 3 weeks where they've come back on the road from 3/4 time to win. So real character building stuff there for the Swans, I thought.
I mean, it's unusual, isn't it? The Swans are unbeaten on the road. They're not holding their form as well at the SCG, but of course that's nothing to worry about. I think it's more circumstances. North Melbourne got them, and it was a great game, and North have proved really today on the weekend against Richmond that they're stern opposition, and Adelaide as well. Again, a game that could have gone either way. When you look at the game, probably the most unusual aspect of the game was how few goal kickers there were.
Yes.
Only 12 goals to 10 scored by the Sydney Swans versus the Hawks. 3 goal kickers for Sydney, Ronke 7, Hayward 3, and the man in the headlines, Parker, we'll talk about that in a moment too. And then for Hawthorn, Gunston 5, and Bruce, who remains at the height of his powers, kicked 3. So there were, within a game, it's always wonderful to have stories within games, and there were plenty of players putting together in the modern era of personal goal kicking being probably for a good return,
Yeah.
putting together very good games of football themselves.
Well, it was very interesting. At one stage, Ronke had Sydney's first 5 goals, and Gunston had 4 at the same period. I thought we were going to get Ablett v Salmon Mark II.
Well, you know what? If you have a look at the total goals kicked,
Yes.
we probably did.
Yeah, 12 out of 22. Yeah, that's
in
right.
terms of the ratio, we probably had it.
Yeah, it was an extraordinary game from that perspective. But yeah, I mean, Ronke, he was just extraordinary, and he sort of went out of the game, for a period. But then he
kept tackling.
But then, no doubt. I mean, I think he was the first player in history, 7 goals, 10 tackles. That has never happened before. That's an extraordinary in itself. Yeah. And then, for such a young guy to then, from a scoreboard sense, to re-inject himself into the game late when the game was up for grabs. So not only did he set up the game at the start, he finished it off at the end as well with 2 really important goals.
It was a great mark. I mean,
it was
an excellent kick into Ronke, but he took the mark, and you almost had to scratch yourself and say, is that the kid in his 3rd game? Because he was under immense pressure. Stratton was flying back with the flight of the ball. And given the scoreboard, given the hour, that was a really...
It was clutch.
It was clutch.
Yeah.
Regardless of the fact that he'd kicked 6 previously.
Yes. And it's... I mean... Even there's a storyline within this, and it's just Sydney's ability they just keep finding these players. Their development up in Sydney is just sensational. I think 11 of their players were rookie listed, so I mean a big tick to Sydney's development.
I know as a fact that John Longmire is a big fan of Will Hayward.
He's a gun.
He's kicked 3 goals in 3 games, all of them low scoring, tight affairs, and all of them telling goals. He's an excellent footballer. And just very quickly before we move on to our next feature game, which is the showdown, Parker, he showed what a wonderful footballer he is. He amassed possessions, he kicked 2 vital goals, but he also, with a lot of young players around him, imposed himself on the game, and I think that imposition, with that bump on MP, we'll see him miss some football.
He's been cleared. No,
he got cleared?
Yeah, he's been cleared.
Oh, well, there you go.
He's been cleared, yeah. Michael Christian cleared him on Saturday.
Oh, so I should have known that, really.
Yeah. No, he's been cleared, so good news. I thought that was a good news story. I mean, it was a footy action.
Should he have been cleared?
Well, it was a footy action. I think
been compared to Coxon?
It has been compared to Coxon. I don't know how...
Yeah, I think he's very lucky.
Well, I mean, to me, he sort of went in the right way, and Impey led him with his head. Now,
I think Impey was committed to the ball. He double clutched at a ball that was on the ground. So Impey can't then raise his head, turn his body. If we're living in the period, look, for most of the time that I followed football, that wouldn't have even been looked at. But if we are now living in this new era of duty of care by the person second to the ball, I think Nick Natanui would ask, well, hang on a second. How is that not an act commensurate in lack of care to what I did?
That's a good point as well. There's no question that there is mixed messages already, big time, and it's very confusing for all concerned. There's no question about that. But just personally, in isolation, that incident, I thought Parker should have got off. But you're right, there is mixed messaging, and it's confusing.
Let's move on to the next game. It is...
What a ripper this was.
The showdown. And, well, let's start with the showdown medalist. I mean... The old showdown medal, I never actually saw Stuart Showdown play, but he must have been a heck of a footballer. But no better than Robbie Gray, whose 5 goals in the 3rd quarter turned around what was, for many people, the script being followed, that Adelaide, 3 or 4 goals to the good at half-time with a better team. But that lead was reined in. Robbie Gray did the reining, and then the last quarter was one for the ages. A great showdown.
Unbelievable. They're already calling it one of the great showdowns, and this is number 44 now. Yep. If you include that final from 05, whenever it was.
See, I've got it at 45.
Oh, okay.
Because there was a...
Oh, of course, the Ramsgate, yes.
Now, that was not played on a football field, but I feel that should be counted as a
And Adelaide won that one, didn't they? Or was it Port Adelaide?
Yeah, I think...
Depends who you ask.
I think Adelaide might have won it, but Josh Carr won the showdown medal for starting it.
Yeah, I think he realised he bit off a bit more than he could chew when he realised it was Mark Rashew that he started with.
What's he doing?
Oh, whoops.
What's he doing here now? It's not good. It's the old Adelaide way of settling an argument in the car park.
That's right. But this had everything, this game. I mean, the last quarter was just hectic. I mean, they got out to, 3 goals?
17 points.
Very late on. Adelaide hits the front. And then Stephen Motlop, the biggest moment of his very short Port Adelaide career, kicks a magnificent goal on the run under so much pressure, ended up being the winning goal. And happy days for the Power faithful.
Well,
and you have a theory on
okay.
Yes.
Hang on, I've got to do the old. We're going to fix the. He's going to hate this episode, Rowan. There's lack of continuity. We've got problems with the ball.
The ball has the minds of its own tonight.
You know what? That's different styles of hosting, I guess.
Yes.
All right, I tipped Port Adelaide in this, and I tipped them on the Friday preview edition of Footyology. You can catch that as a audio download, a podcast. And then the reason I gave, Rowan gave me the old eyebrow raising, and to be honest, his eyebrows almost left his forehead and was somewhere about 3 inches above his hairline. Because I said, I'm tipping Port Adelaide because of the home ground advantage. And that's not an Irish joke. That's actually something I am steadfastly believing in, and that is in both showdowns and derbies, and it's often the case, because obviously ladder position doesn't mean anything, that I feel that these games could go either way and are going to be close. In games that I feel are pitched to be tight, there is a home ground advantage to the team that has the spectator rights and the home ground rights to the game. So I think we observed Eddie Betts kicked one of the goals of the season, and you could hear a couple of whistles and cat calls from the crowd.
It was spooky.
Now, it is unusual for an Adelaide or a Port Adelaide to play at the Adelaide Oval or in the past at Amy to the deafening roars of the opposition fans. Of course, we know that there is, and there always has been, some umpire pull in terms of decision affirmation for the home teams, and that's part of football. But I just feel that a big home ground, home supporter crest of a wave can be ridden by a team, and I feel that's how Port almost got back in the game, and maybe how Stephen Motlop found the winner.
Yeah, well, listen, that's not a bad theory. When I laughed as well when you said that to me, but I think that has some merit, because it would have been eerie, even spooky for some of those Crows players, at this fortress that they're so used to playing at, not getting that much support. So Ryder was back to his best from that layoff that he had against Jacobs.
Isn't that interesting? We had a couple of players in the game. Ryder, I think 2 games or 3 games
yes.
back. And Crouch a couple of games
yes.
back. And I felt that Crouch tired, but again, being a running midfielder, and Paddy Ryder really in a battle of the supreme heavyweights, because they are two of
he's a
really
gun
the best, I reckon, in the competition, bested his opponent. He got 2 goals, and they both fought like the great gladiatorial ruckman that they are. But I just think that good observation, Ronnie, Paddy Ryder might have been a bit of the difference.
And just before we go to the next game, Rockcliffe's best game probably for the club since arriving at Port, which is a good story. The next game now, which was today's game. That was a ripper, wasn't it?
Well, the Cats and the Pies. I'm going to throw to you in a game that, well, look, both teams have been plugging gaps and battling injuries for the season. But it must be said that both sides have found some really good solutions to problems through adversity.
They have, absolutely. I mean, you look at Geelong, for instance, Jack Henry, he's really standing up. Tim Kelly, I mean, he would probably be in the best 22 anyway, but he's just relished this, because the big 3 hasn't really been assembled too often for Geelong.
That's right.
And he's just flourished. He's just flourished. And
I mean, he and Ratugolea,
yes.
They were earmarked for senior football this year. Both were picked for round 1. But again, just Geelong have been able, I think, much better than in the last couple of years, to outsource out of their best 22.
Yes.
I think in the last couple of years that's been a problem for them, and this might be their way, not back into the top 4. Well, they were in the top 4 last year, but I don't think they were relevant last year in the finals. I really felt that top 4 came about because of maybe home ground. When you play 8 games at home, it might have been an inflated ladder position. I think this year is different. What's your take?
No, it's very true because, I mean, even like Cunico is, they're finding all these youngsters like that, and Parsons is becoming a decent player as well. And Tommy Stewart, he was always a good player, but he's now rising to that All-Australian almost level now.
Yep.
And I think that's a very valid point. They still have their injury concerns, but I mean, Ablett and Taylor back helps. They've another game under their belts.
Yep.
I mean, Ablett returns 32 touches, 1 goal. I think he's now 3 or 2 off the all-time record of 30 disposal games. I think Sam Mitchell's on 121. He's now on 119.
Yeah, he'll get him.
So he'll probably get him. And listen, Collingwood, they had their chances today. I mean, they kicked 5-15 or thereabouts, didn't they? So, like when I said it was a ripping game today, it was that real arm wrestle. Like it was a real battle. Like every goal was really, there was a lot of weight was on each goal that was kicked today. And
so bad luck for Collingwood with Tom Phillips.
Yes,
he kicked a couple of goals.
Good play, Tom Phillips.
Yeah, kicked an excellent goal and then got injured. Got knocked. Got a heavy knock.
Yeah, an accidental knee from Chris Mayne in the back of his head, and that was on top of Darcy Moore, of course, re-injuring his hamstring, which is that's really bad news for Collingwood. And on top of that, Jamie Elliott has re-injured his hamstring at the VFL. Yes, so those Moore and Elliott are a fair way away now, and that's listen. You look at the ladder now. Is it 1 game separating 3rd and 13th? Those little things, they could be the difference between a final spot and not for the Pies.
Why has Fasolo been on the outer this year? He's played probably 5 games in the VFL, and he continues to be overlooked for some not curious choices, but virtually everybody on the list is getting a game ahead of him.
Well, I think curious choices is a fair assessment. I mean, for 3 weeks, Blair and Mayne were ahead of him.
Yep.
And if you were to say that before the season, you would have thought there's something going on. And I've heard that he's not the best trainer.
Yeah.
I think it's an attitudinal thing. Clearly, we know he's got the talent. There's no question about that.
We know last year he made public personal battles with mental health issues. And whilst any football club now is far more understanding of that than in the past, a coach still needs to, and a club still needs to have levels of commitment through training and through programs, fitness and exercise programs, and if he hasn't been able to maintain those, and this is only guessing, because there must be other reasons besides his football.
It has to be.
His football, as we know it, demands him, and also he's kicked goals in the VFL.
Yeah.
So if you have a look at his VFL form, it says pick me.
Yep.
Interesting that he hasn't been picked. Maybe now with Elliott re-injuring his hamstring in the VFL, opportunities will open up. At 5:15, you'd think there's spot for a Fasolo.
That's right. They have to straighten up next week. Yeah.
Let's move on to some of the games on the weekend, or the rest of the games on the weekend, and have a shorter, sharper, but hopefully just as incisive look at them. And start off with a really important game for the future of this season in terms of top 4, top 8, and premierships. And that is GWS versus West Coast. Yes, GWS have a lot of players out, but when you consider the wealth of riches at their behest, West Coast outs probably, to me, even outweighed them.
It's a big call, and it's not the most outlandish call, because you take the equivalent of Nick Nat, Shuey, and McGovern out of any team. Yep. So that's your best ruckman. And Sheed, I don't think was playing either. Yep. That's right, yeah. But in terms of like the 3 outs, so they just copped.
Yep.
You take that out of any team, it's going to be a struggle.
Yeah.
One of their biggest knocks was travelling in recent times. They've now won 4 on the road now, I believe.
Yeah. Anywhere but the G.
And they even won at the G. They beat Carlton there a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
I know it's Carlton.
Yeah, it wasn't probably as decisive.
No, it wasn't.
It didn't put those demons to rest.
No.
But let's focus on the weekend. And boy, oh boy. I know we're not going to steal any thunder, because I know coming up in our Hots or Nots will be Jack Darling and West Coast Eagles. But his hands are fantastic. His belief is fantastic. And I love the way every time he takes a mark or kicks a goal, the first man on the scene, almost looking like a fan jumping the fence to tap somebody on the bum after they've kicked 100, is Josh Kennedy. He's deriving an enormous amount of pleasure in the success of Darling, and I think that he's been part of the off-field work to get Darling's confidence back up.
I think that's a very good assessment. And if you ask me, I mean, on my own podcast, I've got a podcast called The Four Horsemen. Last week I thought we were asked our grand final predictions very early on, third of the way through the season. I thought at that stage Richmond West Coast, just purely because they just keep winning at home. They're going to get 2 home finals. Now I'm very confident that this week's game will be a grand final preview. Richmond versus West Coast. Who would have thought that pre-season? Adam Simpson's done a magnificent job, and full credit to them. Great effort. They're 7-1.
I said this prior to the start of the season. I'm going to say it again. I'll say it to Leon Cameron, and you know what? The power of social media and YouTube and this program, Footyology TV, who knows where it ends up and who watches it. But Leon, I hope you are watching, because Rory Lobb can't ruck. He can't ruck. Now, he can play, don't get me wrong. He's one of the best contested marks in the competition. We know that you love putting him into the back line at the end of quarters to shore up maybe a leaky defence, or to just get to a break without any further scoreboard damage from the opposition. He remains a good contested mark. He can't ruck. He couldn't ruck against Lysette. And when Lysette wasn't rucking, they were throwing anybody else in the ruck. And to be honest, they were beating Rory Lobb in the ruck. He's just not a ruckman. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe because he's tall, he doesn't have the right centre of gravity.
It's an issue for them, but from one end of the spectrum to the other, Carlton Essendon.
Well, you were there. Tell us about it.
I was there. Same stuff, different week for the Bombers, unfortunately. I tipped Carlton with supreme confidence this week, having watched pretty much every minute of every Essendon game this year. They're in free fall, the Bombers. The game plan, I can't make heads or tails of it. They are a team completely bereft of structure, completely bereft of confidence. There's almost a sense of self-preservation mode out there on the field. It's no one wants to take the responsibility. They'll get the ball, handball it to a mate who it wouldn't even matter if that teammate is in trouble with the guy bearing down on him. Have the responsibility. I don't want it. Really, the forward structure's horrible. The forward delivery is just atrocious. And it just made life very easy for Brendan Bolton and Carlton yesterday on the Saturday.
I watched the game, and do you sometimes watch a game of football and think, gee, time passes quickly? Because I'm watching Carlton Essendon the G on Saturday afternoon, and I did remember, and as you would when you've watched enough football, and I've watched more than any man should, of great clashes between these two teams, and of the halcyon days when these two sides were chock full of champions. Of course, the famous day when Kernahan took the kick after the siren and kicked it on the full. And, but that day, if you looked around, there would have been Kernahan and Watson and
Bradley and
Bird and
champions everywhere.
Champions here, there, and everywhere. Yeah. And there was just a moment yesterday, and there's nothing against these two kids, and they are maybe taking the baby steps on the journey of being long-term AFL footballers. But they didn't look at yesterday at the MCG when I saw much of Essendon and O'Brien of Carlton tracking the ball to the boundary, and I thought that is just so VFL. These kids have underdeveloped bodies. Their skills at this stage don't demand a spot in an AFL team, and they would get gobbled up, these young kids, as I say, that I hope, and everybody hopes, they're on the way to great careers, but at the moment it's boys on men's errands for both teams, and I just knew whoever lost this team would be suffering the glare, and Essendon suffers the glare, and by extension, Woosha.
Yeah, and just quickly, before we go into the next game, big tick to Ed Kerno. He's a very underrated player. Shut down Zach Merritt, had 20-odd touches the other way, 10 tackles, 2 goals. Magnificent game.
Let's move on to another game on Saturday, and this was a game that probably showed a development in a side, and we're seeing different versions of Melbourne wins that are telling us that Melbourne is arriving on the main stage, and if you're a top 8 team, even top 4 team, you better learn how to cope with them. And that was that in a game that Melbourne probably always looked like they were going to win, they actually didn't just get that 3 or 4 goal victory by dint of having too many superior players. They put the foot down on the throat and send Gold Coast to China to play Port Adelaide in exactly the wrong state of mind, because they've been brave, Gold Coast.
They have been.
But given how meekly they surrendered in China last year, and how poorly they prepared for it, and how full of excuses they were before the first bounce, the last thing they needed was an 8-2 last quarter to send them off with.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, as you say, they've been brave, but this is what the 8th week now they've been on the road essentially.
Yep.
I mean, Brisbane's still now a trip away from Gold Coast, so I think it might just be catching up with them a bit now, the Suns. And I just wonder whether that, when they sold that game to Freo, whether that may have just derailed a bit of the momentum, because they started the year well, 2 really good wins, 2 and zip, and if they could have possibly played somewhere in Queensland, I don't know exactly. Maybe they played in Brisbane yesterday, so. If they managed to play, I don't know, Freo in Brisbane, I don't know if that was possible. If they could have done that, they could have gone 3-0 possibly.
Oh, there was $1 million that said they should.
Yeah,
and of course
the AFL's own money.
Well, the AFL funding
paying themselves.
The AFL's funding them, but if they can get the money externally, just very quickly, Tom McDonald again proves that he's a capable forward. Jack Martin played really well. He's taken a while to get probably the body that he needs to stand the rigours of AFL football, but he played an excellent game.
No, he was very good. What is our next game?
Let's go to Saturday night. There's a couple of choices. And
close to your heart?
Yeah, we'll start with Fremantle and St Kilda. And this game was, for Saints fans, if this was Saturday night at the movies and your missus chose the movie, or your partner, your husband might have chosen the movie, if you're a St Kilda supporter, get 10 minutes in, you would have gone, why did you pick this? We saw this last week. Why are we watching the same film? St Kilda can't score. St Kilda, when they do. St Kilda, for the first 10 minutes of that game, it was Fremantle 1 point, St Kilda no score. And St Kilda were competing and contesting as hard as any team could. But don't worry about the fact that at half-time St Kilda were 1-5. They must have kicked 4 out on the full and another 4 wide of the mark, just bouncing out. So I reckon St Kilda had close to 15 shots at goal in the first half for 1 goal. Look, they've got a lot of young kids playing now. And I must say, I was very impressed with the first game up. We spoke about Tom Phillips.
Yeah, Eddie.
His brother, Ed Phillips, had run. He's got plenty of league football in him because he has all the modern ingredients of being able to run. One-on-one he competes. And his ball usage, well, at St Kilda, if you drop it and it hits your foot, you're sort of class average. And he's even better than that. So... You know the problem. You know your problem. You know what your problem is at half time. When you're 1-5, and you've kicked 8 out of bounds. You got a problem when that 1 goal was from a set shot by Sam Gilbert.
Speaking of set shots, what has happened to Tim Embry? He used to be a beautiful shot for goal. What's happened to him?
As Lurch of the Adams family would say. Just quickly on Freo. They had to stand a bit of press during the week.
A bit more homekeeping.
Let's do that because...
Rowan will love that.
Because...
this ball's got a mind of its own.
Yeah, everyone's going to hate this episode, but that's okay. It's different to you, Rowan. That's the beauty of it. Look, Freo had some distractions during the week.
Yes, they did.
Their coach is above that. They're clearly... And they had some players out. And for a team that is... not top heavy in stars, to go into the game without Wilson, who's been fantastic for them, Michael Walters, who is such a brilliant forward, and they had another top player out, come to me in a moment. Obviously they rely heavily on Fife, and St Kilda are susceptible to 18th for clearances, so coming into the game. So you knew that Sandilands to Neil to Fife or Fife to Neil was going to be part of the game. Well, it was, in the end, probably after St Kilda put in a spirited third quarter, it was clearly the difference in that last quarter enabled Freo to get some goals. Let's move on to Bulldogs and Lions, and they are really proving themselves to be quite the attractive 0 and 8 team, aren't they, Brisbane? Because they give you a good game, but they prove something on Saturday night. They don't know. They have no idea how to win.
It's very interesting you say that. I mean, I reckon you take away that Richmond game where, they kicked 2 goals for the whole game. They've been at least in it at some stage in every game, but they just can't get the job done. And you wonder how long it will take for that to start wearing down on a team. Like, how long does it take for the enthusiasm to gradually just chip down. You keep losing. It would be, I imagine, pretty tough to keep rocking up every week. But again, they were quite late in this game. They were within range. But they just can't.
I don't think they look like winning. I think we're now flattering them a little bit at 0 and 8. Look, the Bulldogs have a pretty inexperienced team. You look around that field.
Oh, absolutely,
This
yes.
is not the side you expected the Bulldogs to have, and they've got a forward line with some real rookie-type players who play rookie-type football. So I think the equation was pretty simple for the Lions, and they've got a midfield blessed of a lot of ability. They've got Beams in there. They've got Zorko.
Martin, the ruckman.
Yeah, Stephen Martin's a ruckman who completely dominated because the Bulldogs
They
chose
believed
to
in
go
ruckman.
in without Tim English. So Boyd only played occasionally in the ruck. So the main ruckman was Dunkley. So of course Martin's going to dominate. And really, when you added everything up and watched the game, he was one for Brisbane to win. Norton, who's a very important defender for them, did an ankle and knee in the one unfortunate action, and he was off the ground. So there were possibilities there, and this is Brisbane driving at them. Now, when you think of a team with a few minutes to go, right in the position to win this game, they've got the momentum, and they muck it up. You probably think of, did a guy miss a shot from 30 out, or did somebody make an error at full back? No, it really was sort of symptomatic of the Lions that with 5 minutes to go, whoever had the ball was going to lose in the game. And incredibly, it was Lewis Taylor.
Oh, that handball.
In the middle of the
Yeah,
ground.
that was terrible.
They're transitioning from forward to back line. They've got players
Yeah.
streaming down the ground. I mean, they are off to the races.
That killed them.
Lewis Taylor takes a mark on the defensive side of his own square, that defensive line of the square. And he could go left, he could go right, he could go over the top. And he handballed into the man on the mark, who only then had to kick it to two Bulldogs players who had been left flat-footed on their own, in their own 50.
Yeah.
Well, that gives you an idea how many Lions players were storming up the field.
That's right, yeah.
You know what? I mean, that is just...
That's a good point, yeah.
That is 1,001 ways to die, or in the Lions' case, 1,001 ways to lose the game, because they just, at the moment, don't have much self-belief.
And speaking of Norton, they're now Norton 8.
Norton.
Oh, boy. And I think we got one more game.
We move on.
Which was a good game as well. That was
good value, North, aren't they?
I love North Melbourne. They're fast becoming my team of 2018.
Yep.
You know, they're not the most flash, they're not the most sexy team, but geez, you know what you're going to get now. I mean, there's a real body of work now. 8 weeks of maybe that Port game was probably the one blip. You know, maybe the Melbourne game to an extent, but they were quite competitive in that game as well. I just love the way they're going about it. They're just so organised. They're all heart. They have a crack. I mean, they pushed Richmond, the raging hot, red hot, premiership favourites. They pushed them right to the line today.
Yeah,
And
and after being down, that at one stage it was 8-6 to 4-3. So
that's right.
or something along those lines.
They were down by 4 or 5 goals.
Yeah, I mean 52 to 26.
Yeah.
Now they're playing the team with the best finishing record
That's
in the
right.
game,
Yeah.
and they really could have won it.
Well, we talked about this off air before the show. Benny Brown, you cannot tell me that footy isn't played above the shoulders, because those 2 shots he had late on that he missed, unfortunately for them. I mean, if he had those shots in the first or second quarter, he's one of the most beautiful kicks in the comp. They were going straight through the middle.
Yeah.
And it just got to him. The pressure got to him. I think he knew what was at stake with those kicks and fluffed it, unfortunately. And just as a subtext to that, I was quite bemused at the umpiring interpretation of the continuous play/advantage rule.
Yep.
At one end of the ground, it was early in the game, but Caddy, everyone stopped. Caddy even stopped, looked around. He was given the advantage, ran on, kicked a goal. And at the other end, Mason Wood, it was a very similar situation. Play stopped. Mason Wood sort of stopped, ran into the open goal, kicked it, but no, the umpire brought it back for Brown to have a shot from 45 metres out. And in a game where it's decided by 10 points, it's who knows what could have been. But North Melbourne, they're right in the finals mix now. They've beaten Hawthorn, they've beaten Sydney, they've pushed Richmond.
Yep.
They have to be a real finals contender now, and good on them.
Good call, and another great job by Jacobs this time.
Yes,
Dustin Martin.
great job. Yeah,
really good. Yeah. And Dustin Martin, frustration almost boiled over a couple of times.
Yeah.
That's it for the wraparound. Stick around for Hot or Not. It's time now for Hot or Not, and great to have Ronnie Lerner, by the way. Not that I know if you can even start watching Footyology TV halfway through, but if you've just joined in and you want to know where Rowan Connolly is, he's currently in a detention centre in China. Apparently he's transgressed some of their communication laws, and we expect him back for the 2043 season. No, he's off in China, part holiday, part work, and he'll be back when the money runs out. I'll start off with a hot.
Go for it.
And I want to, being a former umpire, and I know the umpires cop a hell of a lot, especially, and I think most people understand that umpiring this game is difficult, and most of the frustration stems from interpretations imposed on umpires by the lawmakers and the AFL who want to change how the game looks. So when there's an opportunity to give an umpire a bit of a bunk up, I take that opportunity. And Eleni Gluftzis was umpiring the game between Carlton and Essendon.
She was.
Now, it's not easy being an umpire that is easily identifiable, because most fans, during the irrational state of following a game of football, especially when they're there, have anger for all umpires. But, you know, umpire Foot, umpire Stevic, most umpires just blend into one another. Meredith, this, that. Who knows
Donlan.
Who knows who's Donlan? Who knows who's Margetts? They're all, 182 centimetres.
Sound like a jockey.
clean cut and hard to pick the difference. So when you get somebody like Ray Chamberlain, who's knee high to a grasshopper, or Eleni Gluftzis, who of course stands out because she's the only female field umpire, they're often sort of a beacon for criticism, because people go, "Oh, I hate Chamberlain," or "That Gluftzis is no good." It's a name that they can readily pick because it's somebody that they've readily identified. And I think Eleni last year copped a fair bit of criticism on her debut in a couple of games. And look, it's not easy starting out, and maybe some of it was justified. So I had a close look at her yesterday, and I thought she umpired well enough. But the key is key moments in a game of football. And the key moment in this game of football came in the last quarter, when a ball was kicked into the Carlton forward line. And she paid a decision that I find some umpires are incapable of paying through a lack of understanding of the rules. And the rule clearly states that a ball is to be called a mark when a player has control of that ball. Now, that can be a split second. If a player takes a clean grab and the ball is instantly punched out of that player's hands, it is a mark if it's brought to a dead stop. And Sam Kerridge took a mark that others may not have played, but was clearly a mark. And I think it was a great decision by Gluftzis. So she gets a hot.
Very good call. Very good call. Well, I'm going to start off with a hot as well. And we sort of touched on it earlier in the program, but West Coast, in particular, Jack Darling. I mean, speaking of knockers, he's had his knockers in recent years. Knocks on his ability to, possibly get a hard contested mark, the contested ball. There was obviously the incident in the 2016 elimination final.
He came out very badly,
which is
a grand final and a preliminary final.
That's right, the grand final as well. But he has just really taken because he initially at the start of the year the responsibility really was on his shoulders because Kennedy had missed the first month or so. But he's just gone from strength to strength. Even with Kennedy back in the side, he's on All-Australian track, and I really pay him a lot of respect and a lot of credit for the season he's having. And he's been one of the driving forces behind this remarkable West Coast season now. And the Eagles have now won 7 in a row for the first time since 1996 or thereabouts. It's just an extraordinary achievement. There's now already, after 8 games, there's 2 games separating the top 2 and the rest of the comp. That's West Coast and Richmond. So for West Coast to already be in that rarefied air, when everyone, I reckon, well, maybe except for the people in WA, everyone thought they were going to be bottom 4, bottom 16 this year. And they've just been a sensational story, and what a win it was on the weekend against a supposed premiership contender on their home deck. Magnificent. Well done, West Coast.
My next is I'm going to go for a knot. And I'm going to stick with umpiring. Right, because I hate moments of the completely lack any common sense whatsoever. And in the game between Geelong and Collingwood, there was an incident where a boundary umpire and a goal umpire and a field umpire were able to make a decision that defies logic, and it involved Asafa Radaglia, and he took a mark in the forward pocket, and he actually grabbed the ball just inside the boundary with one grab and then toppled over the boundary, and the boundary umpire was able to tell the field umpire that it was a throw-in. Now, how can you have the ball thrown in? If he contended that the ball was juggled over the boundary, it simply wasn't. Were you familiar with the incident?
I missed that incident.
Okay, it happened in the forward pocket, and it was replayed a couple of times, and it simply was an opportunity for the field umpire, who holds seniority over the boundary umpire, to say, look, son, mate, pal of mine, the bloke took a one-grab mark. Was it inside or outside the line? It denied Radaglia a shot at goal, and the young footballer didn't protest. He wasn't demonstrative, because he probably was in his first year of football so bemused, confused and misled that he wouldn't have known what was going on. But it just shows, with the common sense applied by Lenny Glufsis, on the same weekend, there was a lack of some at another game.
Two sides to every coin, I guess, Finey. I think I'm going to follow in your footsteps and go with a not as well. And like there is two sides to that coin, there was two sides to the coin on Saturday at Spotless Stadium and the GWS Giants. I'm not quite sure where they're at the moment. I mean, I know they've had their injury concerns, and at one stage a few weeks ago, they were dead set missing 10 or 11 of their best players. So that's fine, but they're starting to get their plays back. I think they're still missing probably 6 guns. So they're missing Green, they're missing Scully, they're missing Deledio, they're missing Kelly, they're missing Kennedy, and they're missing Williams. So that's a decent 6 or 7. But on the flip side, like you said earlier in the piece, West Coast were missing.
Remember, they played Patton in the Neefel.
Yeah, and there's that too. So there's the issues going on there as well. They brought in Lob back for the ruck, and I don't know what they do with their ruck, because Dawson Simpson clearly is out of favour. They don't rate him anymore. They gave him a shot earlier in the year that he was dropped, and I think that's probably his paper stamp for the year almost. But I just don't know where they're at the moment, because I fear that they don't have the same amount of depth. They've got a really strong 20-25, but it really falls away quite quickly beyond that. And I think Leon, the coach, is really struggling to get his head around it, and they just don't seem like a team playing with much, pep at the moment. They're just sort of going through the motions. They now find themselves outside the top 8, which I think a little alarm bell. But we're round 8 now.
The alarm bell should have rung when they couldn't beat St Kilda.
Yes, and now we've got another alarm bell. So that's 2 alarm bells in the space of a month. Yeah. And well, if they can't get those players that we mentioned back early enough, these guys that are available, they're going to have to find a way to win, like Geelong has been able to do so well. They're in the top 4 now. Yeah. If they can't do it, it could be a really surprising year for the Giants, and it could be, ramifications.
I agree. Mm. Those alarm bells ringing reminds me of an early episode of The Simpsons when Homer went to buy a RV, one of those Winnebago type things, and he picked out the best one, and as he was having his finance confirmed by the salesman, the salesman tapped in the computer, and then the computer, this light went off and this siren started going off and go, woo, woo, woo. And Homer said, "Is that a good siren?" And the salesman said, "Homer, have you ever heard a good siren?" And it's like the alarm bells at GWS. There's no good alarm bells, so I suggest they keep their ears peeled and realise that there's some problems there. My last one is a not, and I don't like finishing on a negative note, especially last week when I had a hot for Gold Coast who lost against Bulldogs in Ballarat, but they played 9 Queensland-born players, which was a record. And I thought that was a great achievement in a close-fought game. Mm. Well, they have plumbed new depth this weekend. In the Neefel, they fielded a side with 11 senior-listed players, and their total score was 0-4-4. They failed to kick a goal in the Neefel. If that is not a serious issue...
Jeez, that's unbelievable.
0-4-4 in the Neefel. Probably the weakest of all of our secondary or, to use an old term, reserve competitions.
Wow.
11 listed Gold Coast players, and they kicked 0-4-4.
That's train wreck sort of territory. That's real. That's
a worry, isn't it?
Alarm bell's becoming a theme of this show. Yeah. There's an alarm bell.
Yep.
And I think I'll finish off with a hot. And my hot goes out to a guy by the name of Ben Cunnington. set the all-time record on Sunday/today for contested possessions, 32. The lazy 32. He is just a magnificent player. He is one of those guys you'll just love to have in the trenches with you. I mean, you know, he's not the line breaker. That's not his job. Yeah. But geez, he's at the coal face. He's tough. I mean, there was a moment today where he squared up to Dusty, got in his face.
Yeah, that was after Dusty sort of challenged Ben Jacobs.
Yes. That's right.
Cunnington was great because he sort of snuck in there on false pretenses because he actually went in there to have a word with the umpire, but then he turned around and he said, "I'm not really here for that, mate. Don't worry about that." And he got stuck right in with a Trojan horse.
That's it. He's sensational, and he's really indicative of the year that they're having. Their best players they're playing to their capabilities, and the youngsters see that. They see this is how footy's more housekeeping.
Yeah. I'm just doing it as a matter of course. And there goes the ball.
And it's Ro will love this episode. Yeah. And he's just been magnificent, just like most of his senior teammates. And just a quick little hot, I know we mentioned him earlier, Ben Ronk, 7 goals, 3rd game. What more can you say? As Sandy Roberts once said when Ablett kicked that magnificent goal all those years ago. What more can you say?
I can say this. It's time for the rant-off! Well, it's some people's favourite part of the show. It's other people's favourite part of the week. Look, we enjoy doing it. It's the rant-off. And Ronnie, sort of tradition dictates that you'll go second.
That's fine with me.
And that means that I'm off first. Now, can you count me in? This is going to be, hopefully, a bit of fun.
3, 2, 1.
I'm pissed off, Ronnie.
Oh, why is that?
Because Rowan's not here to give me my weekly dose of Roko's rant. Roko Goes Loco has become part of my life, and I've gone from being attracted to it to addicted to it. In fact, it's this time of the week that he inserts a little bit of ham acting into now what is oxygen for me and my weekly dose of "I'm pissed off, Finey." Well, I'm pissed off that there's no Roko saying I'm pissed off. And there's no Roko segueing into, you know what really pisses me off? And then a diatribe into the latest transgressions by the goal review system. Some stuff up over a point, some disagreement over an out of bounds on the full, or heaven to Betsy, Rowan, an apoplectic fit over a player having his fingers bent back and it being shown more time than reruns of Shawshank Redemption on TV. I miss you getting all fussy and het up about it. And then I miss somehow how you segue into hating the goal review or the score review situation to your weekly, you're just able to insert jab and jibe at Coldplay. What has Chris Martin ever done to you? Sure, they're a little bit trite and maybe predictable and their music isn't exactly Rage Against the Machine, but why do you rage against Chris? Are you confusing him with the New Zealand bowler who was the worst batsman of all time? Just because Chris Martin couldn't score a run doesn't mean that Chris Martin at Coldplay can't score your affection. Leave the poor bastards alone. And then, of course, at the end, Rowan always turns around to me and said, "Well, what do you think of that?" So as I end my tribute, or may I say my desperately needed dose and missed dose of Roko's Loco show, I turn to you, Ronnie Lerner, and I say, "Well, what do you reckon?"
Not bad. I liked it. Bit out of the box.
Anyway,
bit out of the square.
Anyway, we've got Roko back now. We're not going to say how, but we've done enough to make Roko particularly angry with this episode of Footyology.
The keen eyes out there will be able to.
Yeah. I think everybody, better Andre Bocelli would. Is it Bocelli or Botticelli?
Bocelli. Yeah. What is Botticelli? It sounds familiar.
Botticelli?
No, it's not. It's not. He's Andre Bocelli.
He's Andre.
But what is Botticelli? It sounds.
He was
familiar.
a famous artist.
Okay.
I think he drew women of fuller form.
Well, then good on him. Why not?
I
knew that wasn't going to last.
Now, I'm looking forward to this because this honour is bestowed upon you and no other. You're the first person outside of Rocco and myself to rant.
Wow, that is an honour.
At the count of 3, 2 and 1.
Well, I find it hard to sort of, garner up the faux outrage and the faux anger that you and Rocco do so brilliantly well. Although I'm starting to, a part of me is starting to think that Rocco actually really is angry when he does those rants. But with me, it's quite simple. Fan engagement, it's more like fan enragement. Seriously, I was at the ground on Saturday, the MCG, Essendon versus Carlton. The ability to think, just gather your thoughts, is becoming a weekly battle with the blaring and the music that no one wants to hear and these silly contests and these pointless interviews with people no one knows who they're even talking to. Some club-endorsed hype person has just plucked some guy from some coterie group or some charity or some... I don't even know where they get these people. They interview them. You can't even hear the interview because it's just blaring. The problem with AFL clubs, and probably the AFL by extension, they treat footy games like they're basketball games, which are in an enclosed area, and the acoustics are perfect for this sort of stuff. When you're at the cavernous MCG on a dreary Saturday with the acoustics just going all over the place, music... Bongo Cam, Kiss Cam, all these initiatives that, geez, how did we ever watch a football game without these things? I just don't even know how I went to the footy for 30 years without these things in my life now. It's just getting to the point where, there are times, I'm not even kidding you, there are times where you can't even talk to the person 1 or 2 seats to your left or your right, asking them what their thoughts are on the game. You actually can't hold a conversation anymore because the PA system is just so freaking loud. Seriously, AFL/clubs, give us a chance to gather our thoughts. Maybe in Essendon's case, they don't want you to think about the game, so you can't criticise what's going on. But other than that, I want to actually, talk to the mate next to me about what, the first quarter, the second quarter. How do you think the game's going to go? You can't do it anymore. PA system, cut the wires. What do you think of that?
Pardon, I can't. We can't be... Sorry, we just got a call. We can't be beaten. Oh, yeah, it's hopeless. Somewhere along the line, the AFL and there would have been some first-year graduate out of a marketing course at La Trobe done, some nabob has decided that the average AFL fan, or the one that needs to be won over, the hearts and minds of the football fan, we need to pitch our sale at a 13-year-old gamer with ADD.
It's such a good point you raised because with this whole... There are 2 things to this. Obviously, it's an overinflated AFL with all these people justifying their jobs to show their superiors. Look what I did. I did something. Yeah. That's right.
Programs.
So can I keep getting paid my salary? There's that. But the point that you raised there is such a good one because at the expense of the dog, they're actually pitching everything to the tail, which wags that dog. So that all these fan-bangled initiatives, fan engagement, it's people that don't even really care about the game. Yeah. At the expense of the hardcore footy fans that love the game, go to the game every week. That's who they sacrifice. It's backwards.
Well, it's the same reason Tassie don't have a team.
That's right.
We're there to win the hearts and minds of people not going to the football.
That's right.
We want to get those that aren't there. Those that are already there, they'll put up with anything. Let's be honest. We vote for St Kilda and Essendon. If you're willing to go and watch St Kilda and Essendon play,
that's right.
You're willing to. Then you can put up with any music and any other form of fan engagement. Our time is up, Ronnie. But I think you're going to be back for one more week. Yeah. This was, just the first trial run, first run. Yep.
What they always say most horses are good after the first run, don't they?
Back a second up. I want to thank Ronnie Lerner and everybody involved, Andrew, and of course mysportlive.com for hosting the program. This is Footyology TV. Make sure on Thursdays that you're all over the Footyology podcast, the preview edition, and we'll be back next week when hopefully our teams have put in a better showing. And I bet you hope your teams are playing them.
That's good.